One small ask. Please wear a mask. Remember those signs? They were everywhere. I felt like I saw that at the thruway, at the airport, I mean, on the thruway, everywhere. Everything is relative in life. If you're going to die, then it's a pretty small ask to cut off your leg, right? So when Corona was being marketed as a very serious pandemic, a great plague that was going to strike humanity and leave, I don't know, many, many millions dead in its wake, yeah, it was a pretty small ask to wear a mask. And I don't want to minimize Corona, by the way, because it was a real serious disease that it did kill many people. And there were people in the Orthodox Jewish community that I know that died. And every community had people die. And there are many people who suffered long COVID symptoms as well that are painful and sometimes could be even debilitating. So I don't want to, downplay Corona, but it's certainly what it was marketed as. It was not. Right? It was marketed as the next great plague in the history of great plagues, and that was not what it turned out to be. Again, there's just the difference between minimizing and reality. Like we're not minimizing it, but reality is that it was not the black fever or cholera or tuberculosis or whatever. It wasn't polio. It wasn't these things. And so everything sometimes is about expectations versus reality. Reality for me was that wearing a mask was disgusting, and I hated it, and I did it anyway. And it was something that I didn't consider to be a big deal relative to what I believed was going on at the beginning of Corona, that there was a great plague upon us. I don't know if I have wet breath or something, but my masks got really soggy. So I would put on a mask, it didn't matter what type, cloth or those surgical ones. And after a few hours, the mask would be like wearing a wet diaper on my face. It was gross. And I used to complain to my wife about it all the time. It was nasty. It was disgusting. It smelled. Oh, I hated it. And yet, it was just like something I had to do if I wanted to go out in public and outside my own house. In fact, sometimes, at the beginning of Corona, I wore it around my family back when I was really scared that this was like, who knows? Back when I thought we were going to have to burn the bodies and the clothing to prevent the contagious spread. So, now with the rise of Omicron, the calls for masking is upon us again. And so much has changed, but primarily in regards to masking, the science has really advanced and evolved. And one of the main advances and evolvements is that widespread belief that masking really helps is kind of not accepted anymore, not even by the CDC. Masking, as time went on, let's not get into the whole politics of like Fauci lied and then he backed off and said, no, you should wear masks. I only said you shouldn't wear them because I was trying to save them for healthcare. Well, forget all that stuff, right? There are plenty of videos about that. I just want to focus on one thing. Bottom line is that every time they update the science and the research, they discover consistently that masking is less effective than they thought every single time. To the point where the CDC finally came out and said, it's not really worth wearing it if you're vaccinated. Not indoors or outdoors. If you're vaccinated, there's no reason to wear a mask, basically. If you're outdoors, even, there's no reason to wear a mask, even if you're not vaccinated. Again, this is the CDC, not me. CDC said if you're outdoors, you don't even have to bother wearing a mask. There's just no point. Now, why would they say that? Originally, they were very gung-ho. Because every time they update the research, they find that masking is even less effective than they thought before. Right? And it's all consistently been going in that direction. That doesn't mean it's ineffective completely. Again, I don't want to minimize it. It's just what expectations are versus reality. Managing expectations. Okay? When you tell people masking is super effective, then it turns out that it's only like 6% effective. Is 6% zero? No. Should you wear a mask for 6% when you're looking at a massive population number? Maybe. But 6% as opposed to what they thought it was, which was, they were telling people it's 50% effective or whatever, 95% effective, whatever ridiculous numbers. These numbers are so ridiculous. I just pulled 6% out of my head. I don't remember the real thing. But it does not do much to prevent the spread. Does it do enough that it's worth it? Yes. It's not even worth it in vaccinated. It just doesn't do enough to make people go through the trouble for that tiny, tiny percentage difference. That's where we are. So then comes Omicron, and they're like, uh-oh, Omicron, maybe we should start doing it again, even though the percentage numbers are minuscule between masked and unmasked if you're vaxxed. So what's going on? Now, the main thing that people say is, well, why not? What's the problem? Just do it anyway. Like, well, who cares? It's a small ask, right? Well, there is actually a deeper thing going on here. And I always try and look at things from a different angle than other people. I don't like to just like look at the politics and rant. I want to see, is there a deeper thing going on here in human psychology about masks? And I think there is. And that's because that the way things are presented to human beings has a massive impact on their psychology. And especially when it comes to symbols, human beings are very symbol based. And like I've said many times, everything comes from God, comes from the Torah, comes from the Bible. He created us, he understands us, and if we look to the Torah, we will discover how to properly look at things. All of human psychology is covered in the Torah. All of it. And even though we can go directly to, I think, many examples in the Torah for symbolism, there's one that is very, very extreme in the book of Kings, of Malachim. So I'd like to pick on that one for a second. But before we do, I want you to hear, this is a while ago already, Kyle Kalinske, talking about why we shouldn't be so concerned. Why masking? Why are we so upset? Why are we so concerned with masking? But I'll listen to what he says, because I'm going to pick on it, and then I'm going to go to Malachim, and you'll see what I'm trying to do here. Okay, so let's listen to Kyle for a second.
I think it's fine. I don't know why this became the ultimate culture war issue, but I just want to be clear that everybody participating in it looks colossally stupid.
All right. Now, you should go back and listen to this video if you want to see. You can just look up Kyle Kalinske masks. I think he picks on Matt Walsh in this video, so look up Kyle Kalinske masks Matt Walsh, and this is going to be the first video that pops up. But the main thing I want to brag at, first of all, in the beginning of the video, he admits that the CDC changed, and he agrees that there's no reason to wear a mask. Then he goes on to say that if you wear a mask and you're vaccinated and indoors, that's fine. And if you wear a mask and you're outdoors in the park and you're vaccinated, that's fine too. There's nothing wrong with that, right? And then he says, everybody on all sides of this culture war looks colossally stupid. Okay, that's an opinion. But what's more interesting is what he says right after that. Why?
And that goes from the hardcore liberal who might sneer at you walking down the street when you're not wearing a mask, right? That's happened. Hardcore liberals see anybody not wearing a mask, even outside, and they scoff at you. I think that person's an idiot. And I also think that Matt Walsh is a total idiot, who's anti-mask as a matter of principle, and who finds it disgraceful, arrogant, and offensive if you wear a mask. Everybody should try to be safe. Everybody should try to use their common sense. And everybody should also try to mind your own business and don't be extreme.
Right? Now, I want to stop there. You can go listen to the rest of the video. The point is, this sort of classic both sidesism, everybody's dumb, everybody looks stupid, live and let live, let everybody do whatever they want, what's wrong with wearing a mask anyway, right? And now again, we're seeing these calls in society you should wear masks and we should try and what's wrong with wearing a mask and just be a good person. But the problem is that it did become a cultural thing. And when something becomes cultural, it's not so simple. Symbolism is very powerful. And it's really ironic to hear that from Kyle as well, specifically. You know why? Because Kyle's a militant atheist. You know what militant atheists really hate? Religious symbolism, because they think it drags people into the past. I'm sure Kyle wouldn't say if he walked into some kind of pagan religious ceremony where they were sacrificing a human being on an altar, and he would say, this is disgusting, right? He wouldn't say, imagine a person would say, no, we don't sacrifice people, it's not legal, but we just go through the motions, we all dress up, and we use fake blood, and we all try and get that real visceral feeling of how much we wish we were actually sacrificing a real person. Because we wish we were, we want to, but in America it's illegal. But how much we want to be in that moment to feel that feeling, that rush, as if we were literally stabbing someone in the heart and watching their blood drip down. We wish we were, but, we're not. Would he say, yeah, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that? No, of course he wouldn't say that. It's ridiculous. Of course he would say there's something very, very sick about that. Right? Why? Because there's a symbolism there. Now, that's a very extreme example. But the point is that symbolism has a massive impact on people. How massive is the impact of symbolism on the human psychology? Well, like I said, we're going to go to the Bible because that's the source. Right? So let's see what the Bible has to say. All right? There's a story in the Bible about Shlomo HaMelech's son, whose name was Rechavam. That's Solomon. Solomon's son, Rechavam, made a terrible mistake. And what that was that Solomon, for those who want to read it inside, you can read it. It's the end of Kings chapter 12, or Malachim Aleph chapter Yud Beis, the beginning of Yud Beis, the end of 11 of Yud Aleph. And what the story is that Shlomo Melech, in building the temple, the Beis Hamikdash, had done both forced labor and immense taxation. And the people tolerated it because A, they loved Shlomo, and B, they got the Beis Hamikdash out of it. But after he died, the people were very nervous. Would Rechavam continue? And there was also happened to have been a tremendous amount of resentment building. Yeravam ben Nevat, a popular figure who had been appointed, I think, governor of the forced labor in the tribe of Yosef, which was a very strong and powerful tribe. Joseph had rejected the king's orders, and during Shlomo's lifetime had to run away and hide because Shlomo wanted him killed for not following the king's orders. So now Shlomo dies, Rechavam becomes the king, and the people come to, Yeravam comes back, he returns, and he's now leading a populist movement, and he comes to Rechavam, and in fact, instead of just leading an uprising, he actually says to Rechavam, and he says to him, Avicha hiksha esuleinu v'ata, ata hakel me'avodas avicha hikasha ume'ulai hikaved asher nasan aleinu v'na'avdecha. Your father made our yoke heavy, lighten the harsh labor and the heavy yoke which your father laid on us, and we will serve you. Right? Meaning Yeravam doesn't just say like, all right, let's rebel. He says, you know what? Shlomo's dead. I don't want a war. I don't want people to die. Just do away with your father's forced labor laws. Do away with your father's crazy taxes. Now, you would think like, okay, what if there's so much resentment and so much? Because again, it's a lot. Civil war, that's pretty serious. Rejecting the authority of the king, it's pretty serious. He didn't want to do it. He wanted to see if there was a way that this could be resolved peacefully. So, say what you will, but, points to him. Assuming that he's sincere, which there doesn't seem to be any reason to assume he's not at this moment. Anyways, Rechavam says, give me 3 days to think about it. Now, why didn't he undo it? I don't know. Now, but it does seem, again, you have to look at the commentaries here, but it does seem that Rechavam was very nervous about looking weak. So he was nervous that his authority was being challenged very publicly, and if he gives in here, people are going to think like, oh, look at this little king, little boy, he's weak, not like his father who was strong. So he goes to the elders. Who are the elders? They were the people who served his father, Solomon. Okay, now Solomon, one of the wisest men ever lived, his elders must have been, his advisors must be pretty wise. And he asked them, what should I do? And you know what they say? They say, you know what you should do? You should tell the people, I'll give you what you want. Right? He said, if you will be a servant to those people today, meaning don't worry about looking weak. Yes, it's okay. And what happens is, unfortunately, he does not listen to the advice of the elders. That was his terrible mistake. And instead, he goes to his friends, and his friends say, what are you going to look weak for? They say, you tell them, oh, you think you're going to start up with me? I'll beat you down twice as hard as my father did. And foolishly, and there's a lot going on here that needs a lot of examination, which this is beyond the scope of this video, but this chapter, it requires tremendous amount of intense examination to truly understand what was going on and what went wrong. But foolishly, he listens to his friends, and he goes and he tells the people. It says, "Vayan hamelach esa'am kasha vayazov esatzas kingdom asher yutzu." He ignores the advice of the elders, and he answers them harshly, like his friends told him. And he says, my father made your yoke heavy, I will add to your yoke. My father flogged you with whips, I will flog you with scorpions. And you want to appear strong. And guess what? The people saw, they were so angry, they were so upset, and they were so done. They said, we have no portion in David. Ma lanu chelik b'David. We're done with the kingship of David, the dynasty, the Davidic dynasty. They said, we're done with you. And guess what happens? Yishlach Melech Rechavam es Adoram. Adoram had been appointed by Shlomo, a very feared and powerful man, who was in charge of all the forced labor that had been involved. Now, you would think that people would be scared of him. You know what? They pelted him to death with stones. Right? That's when Rechavam realizes, I messed up. And Rechavam runs away. Now, we should talk about for a second, because this is going to come into play. Let's talk about these people. Everyone involved here believed strongly in God. Everyone involved here would never have done what they did if they didn't think God was on their side. Even Yeravam in a previous chapter was told by a prophet that God approves of your actions. You have a right to go and challenge the king. Right? So Rechavam, if he had done what God gave him an opportunity to do what was right. If he had done as he should have listened to the elders of Shlomo HaMelech. If he had done that, he would have been the king. But he blew it. God gave him the chance. He blew it. And he listened to his friends, which he shouldn't have done. Okay, so the people are so angry and so filled with hate for him and his Davidic kingship that guess what they do? They say we're done. They run away. They leave. They split off. There's now a rebellion, and the people reject the king, and they follow Yeravam. And when he sends out this guy who is like a feared authority figure, they stone him to death. If that's not a statement, I don't know what is. They're clearly very, very done. And I'm stressing it because of what's about to happen. Okay? Now, Rechavam goes and he gathers up an army. And you know what happens? A prophet comes to him and says to him, actually, God says no. I'm sorry, you messed up, and God says no. You had your chance to do what was right. You didn't, and now this is your punishment. Sorry. And you know what Rechavam does? Rechavam says, okay. Okay, so these people were clearly not dealing with people who don't believe in. Everyone here are people who deeply believe in God. To the extent that even when it came to quelling the rebellion by force, God said no, and he said okay. And he gave up his kingship because the prophet told him so. Look what happens now. Yeravam, who only did this because he was told by a prophet that it was okay, he goes and he makes a new seat of his government that was part of this rebellion in Ephraim. And he fortifies Peniel. And Yeravam says, now, what's going to happen now? The people might go back and worship David. They may decide to return their loyalty to David. Why? Why would they do that? Well, 3 times a year, what's called Shlosh Regalim, the people go up to the Beis HaMikdash. And they offer sacrifices. And when the people do that, said Yeravam in his heart, they're going to see the Beis HaMikdash that Shlomo built. This is the very Beis HaMikdash that caused the people to hate Rechavam. They resented Shlomo because of this Beis HaMikdash. But at the same time, the Beis HaMikdash was this national symbol of subservience to God. And they identified subservience to God with the house of David. David HaMelech, David, the great warrior king, appointed by the prophets, appointed by God, whose son Shlomo, Solomon, the great king, built the Beis HaMikdash, the temple. They associated that, and the Beis HaMikdash, that powerful thing, and the offering of the sacrifices. This was something so powerful that when the people would go and see it, Yeravam said in his heart, oh my gosh, you know what's going to happen? The people are going to go and see it, and their hearts are going to melt. Their hearts are going to melt. The same people who hated Solomon because of what he did. They weren't willing to rebel against him. They didn't hate him enough. But they were resentful and angry. And they hated his son. And they went to his son and they said, okay, we'll give you a chance. I don't know, hated is the right word. They didn't hate him yet, but they said, we'll give you a chance, but you got to get rid of these. And his son did, and what did they do? They said, we're done with you. We reject you. We reject your authority. And then he sends out, not just that, he sends out his minister of forced labor, and they stone him to death. And Yeravam says, you know what's going to happen when the people go back and they see the temple and they offer the sacrifices? They're going to say, what are we doing? What are we doing? This isn't what we should be doing. We should be servants of the house of David. Are you serious? And so you know what Yeravam does? And we're going to stop here. You know what Yeravam does? He goes and he builds idols for them to worship. And he says, what do you need to go back all over there to offer sacrifices? Just worship these idols. And ostensibly the idols are at first, he doesn't totally like spin off into his own. At first the idols are like in place of, they're supposed to worship God. It's just in place of the temple. And then it sadly descends into cultists and idol worship. And he totally destroys the religion of Judaism. And after this, there's a big schism where many of the tribes totally go off and leave Judaism. all because of this. And Yeravam is right. I mean, what should he have done? You know what he should have done? He should have gone to a prophet. He should have done something else. I don't know what he should have done. But you know what he shouldn't have done? He shouldn't have done what he did, which was create idols. But let's forget about that. Yeravam knew that the power of a symbol is so great that these same people who had stoned Adoram to death, the same people who had said to Rechavam, we're done with you, we reject your authority, those same people, when they would go and they would see the Beis HaMikdash, they would see the temple, when they would experience the sacrifices, they would see those sights and those sounds and those experiences, their hearts would melt and they would say, what are we doing? Are you kidding me? That's the power of a symbol. Yes. You know what a mask says to people? I'm going to tell you what a mask says to people. A mask says to people, you're not safe. That's what it is. I mean, that is literally the point. The point of the mask is to tell people, you are not safe. It's scary. There's something scary happening here. You wear a mask. It's scary. And at the beginning, people were like, okay, it's a scary time. Maybe we'll get over it. But over time, whether you like it or not, the mask morphed into something else. It morphed into this symbol that the world is not a safe place. We are not in a safe place. It is not a safe time to be alive. You should be scared. The danger is here. To deny that that happened is ridiculous. As long as we perpetuate the masking, people will continue to believe strongly in their hearts that we are living in a time of danger, of much greater danger than there is. And that has a massive effect on society. It's going to slow the reopening. It's going to slow the feeling of, the time of danger is gone, which it largely is. Especially if you live in places that are heavily vaccinated. You've done as much as you can. The masks aren't really doing much. And yet we perpetuate this, and it has a real effect on people psychologically. It has a real effect on, and it helps also divide us massively. There are so many people who think that those who are not wearing masks are just lacking in caring about others, and they're lacking in appreciating the sanctity of life. Because the symbolism is so powerful and it has taken hold in people's minds. I was at a doctor's office. I called up ahead to make an appointment by a specialist for something. And he's attached to some hospital system. And when they answer the phone, they're like, hi, and welcome to the Orthopedic Center of LIJ hospital system. If you are not vaccinated, you cannot wait in our waiting room. You have to wait in your car and we'll call you up when it's your turn, I was like, all right, well, I'm vaccinated. Okay. So, no problem. I walk into the waiting room. Everyone's wearing a mask. And this is before Omicron, by the way. This is going back a few months, before Omicron. Right? After the CDC and everything, it became very, very accepted science that you don't have to wear a mask. And I walk on to the thing, and everybody's wearing a mask. And the lady behind the counter goes, excuse me, sir, where's your mask? And I said, I'm vaccinated. She goes, oh, that doesn't matter here. It's a medical office. I'm like, okay. So, all right. So I put on a mask. I'm not going to fight. And I walk into the doctor. Every person's wearing a mask. Every secretary, every aide, every this, that. So I said to the doctor, what's going on here? I said, aren't you vaccinated? You're part of LIJ healthcare system. I'm sure they mandate that everybody has to be vaccinated. Yep. I said, so every employee here is vaccinated. Yep. Every person in the waiting room is vaccinated, because if you're not, you can't go in the waiting room. Yep. So why are we all wearing masks? So he says, well, it's a healthcare facility, so there's a lot more exposure. I said, so is there science to back that up? Because I follow it pretty carefully, and I haven't seen anything that backs up that notion that in a healthcare facility where there's more exposure, the masks do actually do more. And he said, no, there's not. He was, literally, this is what the doctor told me. He said, no, there's not really. He said, I'm very into the data as well, and there really isn't. I said, so if the CDC says you don't have to wear a mask indoors, why are we all wearing masks? Well, it's just a requirement of the healthcare system. I said to the doctor, shouldn't there be some point? He goes, it's to make people feel safer. And so I asked him, I said, people associate being a doctor with following science. Like a doctor is basically a scientist of the human body. So the people are looking at you and they're saying, oh, the science is that the world is not safe. How do I know? Because I walk into the doctor's office and I have to wear a mask. I said, doesn't that bother you? And without missing a beat, he looks at me and he starts laughing and he goes, what are you asking so many questions for? This is what they tell us we have to do. He said, does it make sense? No. That's what he told me. He's saying, this is the doctor. It makes sense. Not really. He's like, what am I supposed to do? He's like, I'm an orthopedist. I come in, I do my job. I'm an orthopedist. I'm not going to question the hospitals. What do you want me to do? Like, I have a job to do. This is the job. But when you get right down to it, when you drill past all his silly excuses, and again, he wasn't being dishonest. He was just like saying all the things he knows he's supposed to say, and then you ask enough questions, and he's like, all right, you want the real answer, the real truth? Yeah, the real truth makes no sense. It's absolutely ridiculous that I'm wearing a mask, and it's ridiculous that all the people in the waiting room are wearing masks. But the symbolism is so powerful. People don't feel safe. There are people who won't walk into a doctor's office because the doctor's office isn't safe because they're not wearing masks. Even though the CDC and all the science suggests that if we're all vaccinated, it's pointless to wear the mask because the amount of difference that it makes is so minimal that it's just not scientifically rational or sound. But it's a symbol. The mask lets me know that I'm in a place where I'm protected by the mask because it's not safe. It's not safe, and therefore the mask makes it safe. And if it's not true, then it does something to you psychologically. If it's not true that the mask turns a not safe place into a safe place, then what does it say in your brain? What's happening in your psychology? I was in Florida. My father lives in a retirement village called Century Village in Deerfield Beach. And I was there, and I was waiting by an elevator, and a woman walks up to wait by the elevator, and I see that she's socially distancing herself from me while we're waiting outside in the warm Florida air for an elevator. And I looked over at her and I said, hey, what's up? And she goes, oh, it's fine, I said, we're outside. And I wasn't like being rude or anything. I was just a little surprised. And then the elevator came and I was about to get in and I saw that she's waiting and I said, oh, do you want to take the elevator? And she goes, oh, well, I don't want to take it. I don't take the elevator together with people. I said, really? She goes, oh, well, I said, do you want me to wear a mask? And she goes, oh, it's fine. You don't have to wear a mask. I can't make other people wear masks. I get that. And I said, well, I'm vaccinated also. And she goes, well, that's fine. She goes, I'm from Canada. We're more careful up there. I'm looking at this woman, and I'm like, it's not about in the elevator. In the elevator, it still doesn't make sense, but at least we're inside an elevator for a minute, so I get it, maybe. But outside the elevator, in the warm air, we're both vaccinated. They don't let people around over there who are not vaccinated. It's very strict. So we know we're both vaccinated. And I don't even think we weren't strict, I don't know, but whatever. We were both vaccinated. And we're outside. And she still doesn't feel safe. She's scared. And I met many other people there who expressed the same sort of feelings. People who said to me, oh, you have a child under 12, so if you don't mind, we can't be near it. I'm like, why? Well, because children under 12 aren't approved for the vaccine yet. So since you have a child who's under 12, you're hanging around an unvaccinated child, and even though you're vaccinated, I might catch it. It's insane. And it's insane because we've taught people to be scared and to live in fear. And I reject that. So it's not so simple. Symbols are very, very powerful. We have to find a way to make people understand that the world, it's not what we thought it was. Yes, it's a terrible disease, just like the flu and many other terrible diseases, which kill many people. It's a real disease, it's a real problem, but the world is not a dangerous, scary place. People have to live their lives. People have to resume living their lives. That's the way forward. And by making a symbol out of something, the symbol has an effect. And what this symbol says to people is, the world isn't safe. The world is not a safe place. And that's really scary, because those same people also believe that the mask doesn't make the world safe. So they're wearing the symbol. The symbol is the world is not safe. But the symbol doesn't make the world safe. It just lets them know it's not safe and reinforces it. And that's a pretty scary symbol. I'm Laser Weiss, and this is the Blaze and Laser Show. I forgot to say all the other stuff, so I'm going to say it now. If you like this video, please subscribe. And if you think this video is worth it, please share. And if you leave a comment, I'll try and address it. Thanks. Have a great day.